Now, patients who are usually presenting to you in the outpatient department with the complaints of polymyalgias, weakness and fatigue in the proximal muscles, and there is a symmetrical involvement of the muscles, we usually diagnose them with the polymyositis. Now, this is the usual presentation that occurs. The definition is basically encompassing, as you can see, that it is an uncommon inflammatory disease. So it's usually not a common phenomena that causes the muscle weakness affecting both sides of the body. This is basically when we use the word there is a symmetrical involvement of the muscles. For instance, if a patient is saying that he or she is suffering from muscular pains in the upper arm, then there is going to be a symmetrical involvement on both sides. Both the sides are going to be affected. Thoracic muscles can be affected, as well as abdominal muscles can be affected, neck muscles, muscles of the back, muscles of the hip region. All of these proximal areas can be affected. Either limbs can be affected in a particular case. So it basically depends upon a particular case that we are dealing in with, but the symmetrical involvement is suggestive of the fact that the patient is suffering from polymyositis. Now, what is causing this polymyositis? As we went through the triggering factors, we went through the risk factors. So there is a whole platform of events. These are the genetics that are involved. All of these pathological processes, they usually don't happen in every individual. It is just the individuals who are more prone to this kind of a cascade of event. Basically, the pathological process basically starts off when an antigen binds and there is an activation of the MHC complexes in these individuals. These are basically the MHC class 1 complexes that are activated. Now, whenever there is an activation of these MHC class 1 complexes, what happens is the CD8 T lymphocytes, they are activated and there is an outburst of cytokines. So there's increase in the cytokine development or the release of the cytokines. It's basically an inflammatory response. As we just mentioned, the fact that the word, even the myositis, is indicating that we're dealing with a condition, we're dealing with an inflammatory condition, which can result as a result of the stressful conditions. It can result due to any autoimmune responses that the patient might be suffering from, and even it can be the infectious states or the stressful conditions that the patient is having. Now, what will happen after this cytokine release? Now, it is going to basically even affect the vasculature. So there is going to be a perivascular inflammation, and there is going to be a capillary necrosis that the patient is suffering from. These are basically the two major events. The perivascular inflammation and the capillary necrosis, these are the two important events that are taking place, and that is basically resulting in the endovesicular hyperperfusion and muscular ischemia. And this muscular ischemia is basically resulting in the muscular atrophy that the patient might suffer from. All of these inflammatory responses, the release of the cytokines, namely the VLA4, the LFA1, all of these are basically resulting in the endovesicular hypoperfusion that is going to take place. The complexes that are going to enter are the VCAM1, they are basically going to enter the circulation, ICAM1, they're going to enter the circulation, and the cytokines are going to be released. They're again going to affect the CD8 T lymphocytes. The complexes are going to be activated. And then we have the perforin. It's another basically molecule that is going to result in the muscular tissue damage. So this is the cascade of events. The release of the enzymes are basically going to result in the muscular tissue damage. This whole pathological process can be basically evaluated when you carry out the lab investigations in the individual. You also can resort to the muscular biopsy techniques. And that is basically going to be suggestive of the fact that the patient has basically the activation of the CD8 plus T lymphocytes, the release of the cytokines, and the release of particular enzymes that resulted in the muscular damage in the individual. And finally, the muscular damage is basically due to the necrotic factors. The necrosis is the basic process that is taking place due to the release of this particular enzyme, which is known as perforin. Now, the chemokine receptors are basically activated in the muscles. All of these cascade of events, as you can even evaluate over here, it's resulting in the release of enzymes and the particular cytokines, which are resulting in the muscular damage and the muscle atrophy. We have the interleukin 1, we have the TGF beta, we have the tumor necrosis factor alpha, chemokines, and MMPs. All of them are released as a result of activation of the MCH1 complexes on the muscles. Now, as a result of all of these muscular necrosis, we must know that the muscles that are damaged can be even the smooth muscles. They can be the smooth muscles of the GI tract. They can be the smooth muscles of the respiratory tract, or either it can be the involvement of the cardiac muscles as well. So depending upon whether all of this cascade of event is affecting the skeletal muscles, the smooth muscles, or the cardiac muscles, the clinical features are going to appear accordingly in the individual. Now, for instance, if the skeletal muscles are affected by all of this cascade of events, then it is going to be a muscular weakness that is seen in the individual. It can be the hands, it can be the feet that are affected, particularly the upper limbs, or the lower limbs can be affected. The patient may also complain of chronic fatigue that he or she might be suffering from, and it can be even associated with physical activity or sometimes even without any significant physical activity. Then the violet circles around the eyes, they are even suggestive of the fact that the patient has some sort of an underlying inflammatory condition that he or she is suffering from. If the smooth muscles of the heart or it can be the respiratory system that is affected in general, then the patient can be suffering from dyspnea. Or the patient might have symptoms such as an increased heart rate known as tachypnea that the patient may even complain of as a sign or as a symptom that he or she experiences an increase in the heartbeat, even not associated with any significant or vigorous exercise that he or she is subjected to. So these are the prime sign and symptoms that we'd be looking for. These are the prime clinical features that we are looking for. I already mentioned the fact that usually it is not the case that the patients who are suffering from polymyositis may exhibit any dermatological manifestations, but there are always exceptions. And there is always an overlapping phenomena seen in cases of myositis. So there can be not those typical appearance of the dermatological manifestations, but it can be kind of a vague skin rash that the patient might exhibit. Again, you have to keep in mind the underlying pathological processes that are happening, the release of the cytokines, the chemoreceptors that are being activated, and the release of the different enzymes that are resulting in the necrosis. We already emphasized on the fact that there can be a perivascular inflammation, and this perivascular inflammation can result in a suggestive kind of a skin rash in these individuals. Then the patients might also experience a foot drop, and this is basically when again it is going to be a symmetrical kind of involvement of the muscles, and it can be observed when you are carrying out the examination in the individual, and you might observe that there is a continuous flexion of the at the ankle joint, and this is basically considered as a foot drop in the individuals. Morning stiffness is another feature, and the patient would usually complain that the myalgias or the stiffness is usually observed in the early mornings after waking up. Now, this is again a very prime symptom in rheumatoid arthritis as well. So, it can be a confusing picture, and usually patients who are suffering from myositis can be confused as if they're suffering from rheumatoid arthritis. Even in SLEs, that is the systemic lupus erythematosus, they have features of joint stiffness in the morning that are quite suggestive of arthritis. So it can be usually an overlapping picture, and in a lot of cases, when you investigate these cases, the patients are obviously suffering from any underlying disease as well. For instance, patients can be suffering from SLEs or rheumatoid arthritis as well as demonstrating the features of polymyositis. A low grade fever, a continuous fever that is exhibited in these individuals due to the release of the inflammatory cytokines. And then we have a joint pain that is seen in particular joints, for instance, the ankle or the wrist joints. A significant weight loss is also very important, and you have to ask questions regarding. Obviously, there is not a definitive measure of this weight loss in the past, but you ask the patient general questions as if he noticed something that was suggestive of a significant kind of a weight loss. For instance, there can be a difference in the size of the clothing that the patient was wearing, and that is sometimes very suggestive of the fact, and even the corroborative history from the friends and the family can be very important in cases of a significant weight loss over here. So once we have established that this patient might be suffering from polymyositis, we move on towards the diagnostic factors or the diagnostic markers that we're going to look for when we're evaluating these patients, when we have sent the labs, and what particular labs you're going to ask for in this particular case when you are basically suspecting that this patient might be suffering from polymyositis. First of all, looking and examining the clinical features that you have noticed on the history, as well as when you carry out the examination, you notice down the particular sign and symptoms. You look for a symmetrical proximal muscle weakness. So, what if it is the involvement of the upper limb or the lower limb? It has to be symmetrical. When there is an asymmetrical involvement, that is suggestive of the fact that there is some sort of a problem, or that is there is some sort of a pathogenesis that is occurring at the level of the spinal cord, and that is affecting only a particular ascending track or a particular descending track, whatever we are dealing with. So if it is a symmetrical involvement, then there is something that is suggestive of the fact that it can be polymyositis affecting the skeletal muscles. So polymyositis is a usual condition that is affecting the skeletal muscles rather than the smooth muscles. There is a preference for the skeletal muscles in these patients. Then the elevated serum muscle enzymes, the levels of the enzymes have to be looked for. Specifically, the enzymes that are suggestive of a muscular damage are the CK. So CK is basically one of the enzymes. Creatine kinase is one of the enzymes that is elevated whenever there is a muscular damage. For instance, whenever we are considering that this patient might had a heart attack or a myocardial infarction, we usually perform these CKs just to see whether there was some sort of a damage to the cardiac muscles or not. Then we have the CK-MBs that are carried out. We also elevate the levels of the ASTs and the alanine transferase, that is the ALTs. These are all the liver enzymes that can be elevated and that are suggestive of the muscle damage in an individual. LD levels are calculated And then we have the aldolase levels that are also calculated for these individuals. So this is the mainstay for the elevated muscle enzymes. And what are the enzymes? We are going to basically ask for the LFTs. We're going to ask for the heart muscle enzymes just to evaluate whether the heart muscle or the cardiac muscle was affected, whether the liver was affected, and that are basically suggestive of the inflammatory responses in the individual. Then another thing, that is the myopathic changes on the electromyography. They are again going to be suggestive of the fact that there is some sort of a muscle damage that is seen in these patients. Muscle biopsies are suggestive of the triggered muscle fibers, and the scattered muscle fibers, they're again suggestive of the fact that there is some sort of a skeletal muscle damage in the individuals. So we carry out these EMGs and the muscle biopsies that are of course invasive in their nature. So when we start working on the labs, basically we start off with the non-invasive and then we move on to the invasive techniques. The non-invasive would be the calculation of the enzymes, the elevation of the enzymes. We're going to rule that out. And the invasive techniques would obviously include the muscle biopsies. So they can basically clarify the picture and be more suggestive of the fact whether it is some sort of an injurious condition, whether the spinal cord is involved, or whether it is some sort of a condition which is mainly affecting the muscles and resulting in the muscle weakness and the muscle atrophy in the individual. And then only we can suggest or we can make the definitive diagnosis of polymyositis in the individuals.